Would you say that looks like a bonsai? Not yet. Okay, not yet. You probably know what I can do. Well, we like to think that you can make bonsai out of anything. All these plants here, including the silver birch seedling, can be made into a bonsai. So don't worry, anything can be created as long as it has branches and a trunk. So let's deal with this. This is a Japanese larch, and when it's grown vigorously, they get these very bushy leaves. It's a deciduous conifer, by the way, but as they get older and they're kept in the pot for a long time, they get these beautiful rosettes, which is just like a pine. The Japanese and Chinese call the larch a deciduous pine or drop leaf pine. These little seedlings, by the way, they are seedlings, they're silver birch seedlings. If you put it in a little bonsai pot, I can guarantee you, you'll make a beautiful little bonsai. So don't waste anything. This is how I used to start when I started my hobby. Things like that. So remind me, I will do something with it. So let's maybe start on this. I won't talk about the tools just yet. I will talk about the tools in a moment. So let's get rid of these. These are dead. As plants grow, when new shoots come, the old shoots die off. So let me keep the options open for that. And nowadays, most of the shaping is done by wires. In the olden days, the Chinese used to make bonsai using a method which they called cut and grow. And in cut and grow, what they did was simply create the shapes by cutting at the point they want the tree to grow. Supposing I want the tree to have a bend this way, so I cut everything off there, the tree will grow there. If I want to shoot back this way, I cut it off there and it'll shoot back there. Because these curly and angular shapes in bonsai are what makes the bonsai look distinctive. But ever since wire started coming into use, which is, I would say, less than even 100 years ago, people have not used the cut and grow method very much, although in China there is a school that does use the cut and grow method. It's called the Lingnan school, and in that style of bonsai, the trees are grown in that angular fashion, so that's distinctive of that style. But by and large, today most people do the bonsai with wires. They shape the trees with wires, and the wire we use most commonly is aluminium wire. Back in the 70s and even in the early 80s, when we were just getting serious in bonsai, we couldn't get bonsai wire. No one imported bonsai wire. It was a luxury. So all we ever used was coat hanger wire, the insides of electric cables, overhead transmission wires for big trees. So that's the wire we used. But ever since bonsai wire came into use, life is much easier. Assuming you use the right grade of wire, you can bend the tree into any shape. You will notice that we have different grades of wire. This is aluminum wire, which is coated brown or anodized, because most trees have a brown trunk, so it blends with the thing. You can use clear wire, you can use copper wire, you can use steel wire, iron wire, but aluminum wire is the easiest wire to use for bonsai. You've got to use the right grade. How do you know it's the right grade? I think there is something we call common sense. If I wanted to bend that trunk, I'm not going to use a thin wire like that. No way will that bend it. Common sense tells you it won't bend it. I don't need to use something as thick as a pencil, because that would be as thick as a trunk, but something in between. Also, there's no hard and fast rule as to what gauge of wire will bend what thickness trunk, because different species will have different flexibility and pliability. The older the tree, the more rigid it becomes, and it's hard to bend. The yew tree is probably harder to bend than the larch, and so it goes on. Certain trees are very difficult to bend and can snap, like the maples are very brittle. So we bend it very, very little, or we bend it when it's very young. Okay, so we use the correct gauge of wire, and once you put the wire on, what we're trying to create is that S shape. Someone had a very nice Chinese elm. Can I just have that Chinese elm there? That shape, what we call the S shape or the informal upright shape, this curly shape, is largely created by wiring, although there are other methods like sticking it in the ground and then wrapping it around a bamboo pole. You can do it that way, but the more common way is to wire with wire. So assuming you use the right grade of wire, you can now create that shape. We're going to make what is called the S shape, and the S shape is not just a flat S, it's a three-dimensional S. So you think of a coil of wire, and opening the coil of wire out, that is really an S shape. So that is the shape you're trying to create, not just flat. So to make that, think of stirring a pot. That's the action you make, like that. Just stir a pot. So there you are, one piece of wire will create that shape. One piece of wire. How simple is that? Not difficult, okay? So that is what you do. If I want to use that branch, I will, but that is the shape I get with just that trunk being wired. Now, although it came out of the pot at that angle, I think it'll look better if it's potted at this angle. So we'll position it like this. If I use this branch, I don't know, I could use it as a sacrificial to thicken that, but I won't confuse you or complicate matters. Now let's just wire these. Now when it comes to wiring the branches, we find similar thickness branches to wire with one piece of wire. So we have a thing called the two-branch principle, where we use one piece of wire to wire two branches together. Now please try and remember this, because it is absolutely fundamental to wiring bonsai. Although I tell people to do it, during the class someone will invariably go back to their old habits of wiring each branch on its own. There's nothing wrong with wiring. Supposing I want to wire this branch, I could easily wrap it around the trunk and take it out to that branch. But if you keep doing it, the trunk will get congested with wire and it will become very untidy. Whereas if you use one piece of wire to do the two branches, you get a very neat appearance. So you get a better looking tree, tidier tree. So this is the essence of the two branch principle. You notice I'm using wire cutters to cut it. And then the next pair is that one. Or I could even do, supposing I didn't want to go up the trunk, I can wire an existing branch. So the existing branch is this one. I will show you what I mean. And then hook it to this branch. So I'm still using the two branch principle, although this branch has already been wired. So if you get three branches, you can still use this principle. Then the next one will be these two, and so it goes on. Let me just finish it. I remember back in the 80s, some of you may be old enough to remember a program on BBC called Pebble Mill at 1. This was a lunchtime, like a magazine program, and part of it they have a bit of gardening, and a chap called Peter Seabrook used to do it. And because bonsai was quite a novel thing in those days, I did quite a lot of his programs. I must have gone up about 3-4 times. And when I told him that we can produce these larches in 3 minutes, he says that's the ideal time for television. So I actually produced these larches in 3 minutes. So this is how long it should take you. Because I'm talking so much, it's taking longer. But if I set myself to 3 minutes, I could well do it within 3 minutes. So it just shows you, I'm not trying to be very clever or anything, but it shows you it's not difficult. If you go to commercial nurseries in China and Japan, a lot of this work is done by women, and you will see that they can produce this literally in 3 minutes or less. So that's how long it should take you. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's not difficult. It's not difficult. How difficult is this? One piece of wire to do the trunk, and a few wires, maybe four wires to do the branches. There you are. And now all I need to do is put it in a bonsai pot. And I've got a tree that look quite different from what it started off with. So if you've never wired before, I would suggest that you actually practice this. This is an English yew. You can use the same principle. It makes a beautiful little tree. You'll get confidence just from wiring. So go ahead. Serving me well. Always cut wire with the wire cutters, which look like this. Or do any of you own Felco secateurs? These are called Felco, Swiss secateurs. And the Felco secateurs have a little notch here. Can you see that notch there? That can cut wire, but don't cut with that. Although you can cut it, it will blunt the blade. So if you're using Felcos, you can cut it there, but not with the blade. There are a few tools. If you want to buy tools, you could buy some tools and do the class with them. Because if you haven't got tools, I can mention that there is really only one tool you really need, which is a pair of pruning scissors. You can buy cheap Chinese ones. These I think cost £10. They will do the job, but they're not good. Okay, they will do it. So cheap and cheerful is not always the best. Then there are better quality ones made in Japan, which are like £39. These long handle ones are very good. They're twig shears. They can do the same thing. They're for pruning the ends of shoots. You see, they're called twig shears. So this is, as I say, the most useful tool you can buy. If you've seen me on my YouTube videos, I prefer this because I like the grip of the thing. But this is the same thing. These two do the same job. So this is the most essential tool. All the other tools like the rakes, you can add to it, you can improvise. But the scissors you can't get away with. If you've got secateurs at home, that's quite good. So rake is very useful because we tease the roots when we come to potting up. Wire cutters, you could use electric pliers, but the Japanese or the proper bonsai wire cutters are quite unique. They do a very special job and the action is quite different from any other tool. So there you are. So much for about the tools. One of you are finished. I'll come to the hill. I'll sort you out what you said. All right, let's get the hill.
I think that's the way it looks, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. Well, you reckon I've got enough there? Or
Yeah.
for you there or not? Or just need
After being repotted, the roots probably be a bit tender, and to start to feed now might do them more harm than good.
trigger growth, which you don't want.
That's fine. That's cool.
Excellent.
This little kit seems to be alright that I got in there.
Is that your best side? That's a lovely smile.
I don't know which one I like there.